Hi, I'm Dan, this is at Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and I'm here in sunny France to ride the biggest and scariest motorcycle you can buy. Yes, I'm here to ride the new Triumph Rocket 3 Storm, all 2,458cc of it, now with more power, because that's what it needed, right? Now, for me, as someone who's had a bike license for less than a year, this should be pretty intimidating. So maybe as I, wait for the brave pills to kick in, we'll just have a little look around and see what we've got. Now, the Triumph Rocket launched 20 years ago now, in 2004, in its original form with a puny little 2,294cc triple at its heart. That was replaced in 2019 with a new and much improved model with that bigger engine, an aluminium frame and a whole load of improvements that made it a much, much better bike. That has formed the basis for this new 2024 Rocket 3 Storm. Now, as before, the numbers are pretty ludicrous. Power has gone up from 167 horsepower to 182 horsepower, but the torque figure has also gone up a smidge. It's now 225 newton meters, which is a lot for a motorbike. Now, in terms of the kind of look and vibe, that's kind of inspired by the previous black and triple black special editions. So, as the name suggests, you get this kind of blacked out look for the engine and exhaust and kind of matching black anodizing for the frame and other trim parts. All looks pretty mean. As before, you can have your Rocket 3 in one of two main versions. There's the R that you see here, which starts at just over £23,000 and is the kind of the roadster version. Or for another £700, you can have the GT, which is a bit more laid back and feet forwards. Both are £1,200 more than the outgoing model. So apart from the extra power, what more are you getting for the money? Well, it's pretty much the same as before, so it's based around the same aluminium frame and single-sided swing arm out the back. You've got the same 47mm Showa fully adjustable upside-down forks and the same single rear suspension unit with hydraulic adjustment for preload. Thankfully, we've also got the same Brembo Stylema brakes, which, given this bike weighs 300 kilos, well, more than 300 kilos ready to ride, probably more like 400 kilos with a rider aboard, maybe more like half a ton with a pillion and some luggage on board, it needs decent brakes, doesn't it? In terms of new features for this bike, we've got a new style of wheel here, a new cast aluminium wheel, which is said to be lighter than what was on before, so that will hopefully improve the agility, all things being relative. And then we've got a new range of colours comprising carnival red, sapphire blue and granite grey, and these are in combination like a two-tone split combination with black on the tank here. So on the R, as we have here, the colour is on the top and the black is down below, and on the GT that is the other way around. In terms of the tech, that's also carried over, so you've got the cornering ABS and traction control. I think the latter might be quite useful given how much torque we've got to play with. And then we've got the 4 rider modes, including a custom one which is fully configurable, so you can set up a setting with all your preferred kind of calibration for traction control and all the rest. Also carried over is the TFT screen here, which you can Bluetooth to your phone or to your GoPro and run navigation, music, things like that through the screen as well. Navigate via the Triumph app. We've also got standard hill hold and cruise control. I reckon the hill hold will be really useful given how heavy this bike is. Standard heated grips as well, which hopefully we won't be needing in weather like this. But what else might you be considering if you're in the market for a kind of cruiser style bike with a really, really big engine? Well, there's the Ducati Devil, however you're supposed to pronounce it, that Ducati. That's got a kind of superbike style exotic high revving V4 engine, but it's less than half the capacity, it's not as powerful. The bike's similar money, starting wise anyway, so it's it's comparable in that sense, but a slightly different character. Or you could go for perhaps one of the big American bikes like a Harley-Davidson Breakout 117 or perhaps a Indian Chief. Now, they're both kind of around 2 litres, but very lazy in the way they deliver their power, so a rather different character. They're basically 125s in comparison to this, aren't they? Or maybe you split the difference and go for a BMW R18. That's got a big engine, not as big as the one on this Triumph, but still pretty big, and it kind of blends the kind of European sophistication of the Rocket and the Devil, but has a more kind of traditional cruiser look like the American bikes. Now, in terms of riding style, well, I guess we're going to find out, aren't we? But if you have a spectrum running from the Devil at one end through to the kind of chuggy American bikes at the other, and maybe the big BMW as well, I would speculate that we'll find the Triumph is, you know, a little bit closer to the Ducati in the kind of sportiness stakes, but it's kind of, with that engine and all the rest of it, it's kind of its own thing anyway. It sits in its own little niche. I did ask another journalist on the launch who's got recent experience of the Rocket what it's like to ride, and he summed it up as mental. So maybe I should be scared, but you know what? Really, I'm just excited. Right, good morning. Welcome to our Rocket 3 Storm ride out, and a bit of a break from the normal style of my videos. I thought I'd just start with the very first moments on the bike, the first wobbles, to generally try and capture a sense of the whole what the hell kind of aspect. And straight away, this is really weird. I have never ridden a bike with a riding position like this. The feet are all the way out in front of me. I'm really low down. There's a whole lot of bike in front of me. And now we've got to filter through downtown Nice. So what are the first impressions of the Rocket, such that I can tell you? Well, it's big. It's really big. And even just going at 20 miles an hour, I can feel just how immense the torque is in this engine. It's absolutely just from a standstill, as we were there, just the pull, you kind of let the clutch out and it wants to go already, which there's not going to be much opportunity to do that at the moment. So let's just get a feel for what we're on. So I am on a GT here, which means the kind of forward foot pegs, the kind of cruiser-like position, and the slightly lower seat. So on this one it's 750mm. It's 773, I think, on the, and away we go. 773 on the R, which is kind of, it's low for a bike. Oh, that feels weird. But reasonably high for a kind of cruiser type bike. So, your Harleys and your Indians, those kind of things, you're in the kind of 660mm kind of, so they're going to feel a lot more low slung than this. So it's kind of middling. I think the Ducati I keep banging on about, I can't say, the Devil, whatever it's called. I think that's a bit higher, but so on this one I'm sat there, feet are flat on the floor, my legs are bent, so that feels a bit more confidence inspiring. What's really weird is every time I pull away, I don't know where to put my feet, because I go to where I would put my feet normally on a regular bike. This is not a regular bike by any stretch, and my feet are just kind of in thin air. So, and away we go. Yep, there we go. And I'm looking down at my feet and thinking, what the hell are they doing all the way out there? It's ridiculous. So I think that might take some getting used to, and the fact that I've got no weight over the bars either, that feels really strange as well. I don't know how that will feel in the corners, but I guess we're going to find out. And I guess in terms of the other things to get used to is just with the weight. So I think 320 kilos for this GT, something like that, and that's heavier than any bike I've ever ridden before. But apparently, because the weight is so low down in the frame, the advantage of using a longitudinal engine is that the crankshaft is in line with the bike and also very low down in the frame compared with a transverse engine, so that apparently helps the weight distribution massively. So it means that all that rotating mass is low down in the bike and central with the bike, so for all the weight and intimidation factor of the engine, that hopefully makes it a little bit easier to handle. Again, we shall see, but I'm going to say that town riding is perhaps not the Rocket's forte, although these are my first wobbles. I've got to say, this is already taking some adjustment. So yes, even at this pretty pedestrian pace, you can just feel the pull of that engine. Where are my feet going? There they are, yep. I think probably I'll just about have got used to that foot peg placement, and then I'll be switching to the R, and then I'll be in a whole new world of confusion. Right, what are we doing here? Okay. But once you're up and running, it all feels pretty comfortable and relaxed. Well, as relaxed as a motorbike of this potency. No, just give it a little screw. Bloody hell. Oh my god, that was just a little squeeze from second from 20 miles an hour or so to about, I don't know, 2,500 to 3,000 revs, but that's the pickup in second from 20 miles an hour. That, ladies and gentlemen, is torque. So there we go. Anyway, so there's the kind of OMG first impressions of a slightly wobbly rookie rider taking his first steps on the biggest, scariest, most badass motorcycle you could potentially buy. Right, let's get out of the town and get on some proper roads and see how it feels out there. Right, so welcome back to my Triumph Rocket 3 experience, which is all the more surreal when you consider that a little more than a year ago I was taken to the roads for the first time on a 125, and here I am on a bike with 2,458 cc. That is quite the journey. But having kind of wobbled through the street and now put a few miles in on this bike, what have I discovered about it? Well, as you may be able to see, I've switched from the GT I was on at the start, and I'm now on the R. So this is, in theory, it's the more conventional feeling of the two bikes, but let's face it, there is nothing whatsoever conventional about the Triumph Rocket. It is ridiculous. But just to try and put some numbers on that, the riding position on this are, the bars are, or rather the grips I should say, 125 millimeters different in their position, so they are 125 mil lower and further forward. So that and the more rear set pegs create a much more conventional riding position. No more kind of feet flailing around when I come to a halt, as I was on the GT. One thing I have noticed though is I have ground the pegs out on this R a couple of times already, so maybe if you're going to be kind of sending it in the bends, you might want to tweak that peg position, which you can do on all the bikes. And actually, interestingly, you can run the GT pegs on the R, or the R pegs on the GT, and as I say, there's all that adjustability, so you can fiddle around and configure the rocket into any combination you like. So lots of kind of tweakability. And comparing the two, I'd say the GT is probably the more comfortable of the two. A little bit more upright and stretched out, roomy. So yeah, if you're going to be doing big miles, taking it easy, GT is probably the one. If you're a bit more up for having some fun on a road like this, you know, it's going to be a kind of Sunday blast kind of bike, maybe the R. I think the R actually looks a bit better as well, so, but you know, take your pick and mix and match. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get to the main event, which is of course that engine. And oh my god, listen to that, and just look at the way the horizon suddenly gets a lot closer. And this is a real engine of character. Everything's deliberate about this, and I like the fact that Triumph, when it set out to build a really big capacity bike, it went with a triple, and that makes engineering sense because they could make it bigger by setting it longitudinally in the frame. But it's also kind of Triumph's character, isn't it? Because, you know, the Americans do the V-twins, BMW does the flat twins, Triumph is about triples, so why not make its most extreme bike the most extreme take on that formula? And what's interesting about this engine is, aside from the power and the sheer muscle, it's been engineered to deliberately kind of accentuate its triple characteristics. So there's actually a kind of deliberate bit of imbalance built into the engine, so there's a bit of vibration, and that's deliberate. You know, there's a bit of fizz in the mirrors, a bit of buzz through the seat of your pants, and that, and the noise, and the incredible performance. It's all about the engine. How can it not be all about the engine? This is the biggest engine on a production bike anywhere. It had to be the main event, and so it is. And it doesn't matter what speed you're going at, what gear you're in, it is always completely dominant. So if you just wind it on from third, it takes off. And if you wind it on from second, it takes off. Let's go the other way, you wind on from fourth, it takes off. In every gear there's a different experience, and they're all great. And one of the things that I love about this bike, and for me as a new biker and somebody who's been a lifelong petrol head, you know, I've always loved engines and the interaction with an engine that you get when you're driving. Just going to wave my colleague past here. on a motorbike you obviously literally have a more intimate relationship with the engine because you got your legs either side of it. And any motorbike is exciting in that respect, but this one's just more exciting because there's more of it. And as I say, coming from cars, I think as a lifelong petrol head who's perhaps now being left a little cold by cars, they're just not as exciting or interesting as they were. It's a double-edged sword. They've got more capable, so fast cars have got faster, but they're no more engaging, in fact probably less engaging because they're just a bit remote now, whether it's because of electric motors or turbos or hybridization or all these things. And really, to get an engine that's as exciting and extreme as this one in a car, you'd have to be spending hypercar money, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds. And even then, they're kind of going hybrid and turbo and all the rest of it. Even then, they're not as good as they were. So little wonder people like me are kind of making the switch to motorbikes. And while £23,000 might sound like a lot for a motorbike, it's not much when you consider what you're getting in terms of the thrill factor. Now, that's the price of a basic Vauxhall Corsa or something like that, and yet for that money you can get the most extreme motorcycle with the biggest engine that you can buy. And really, it's incredibly attainable, and also weirdly quite easy to enjoy, quite accessible. Like I say, a year ago I was riding a 125, and although there's some intimidation, it's not a difficult bike to ride or enjoy. So, and what about the rest of the package? Well, when I was on the GT, I was a bit wary of that kind of cruiser riding position and whether there'd be any kind of weight over the front end to get it to turn into the corners, but actually it was perfectly fine once you got used to the laid back position. Totally fine and really confidence inspiring. I think I prefer the layout of the R, a little bit more over the front wheel. You can kind of literally lean on it a bit harder, but the suspension is really well set up. The forks support the weight of the bike, and even when you kind of deploy those magnificent Brembo brakes like that, it doesn't dive or wallow. Those brakes are amazing as well. I mean, they need to be, but there's just instant bite of the lever, loads of feel as well, and the back brake is really impressive too. So it's pretty much as big as the front brake on most bikes, but it means you can just trail it through the corners, balance the bike. And in the rear suspension, it's only got 103mm of travel, which doesn't sound like much, but when you compare it with some of the kind of proper cruisers, like, I don't know how much travel a Harley Breakout has, but the Indian Chief, that's only got 75mm of suspension travel. So I've not ridden one, but I imagine that's a little bit like a bit of a pile driver through the bumps. But I've been impressed at just how plush the Triumph feels, even with that limited travel, and just how balanced it is as well. I mean, it should feel like an absolute unwieldy lump, but it doesn't. Chuckable would be going a bit far, but you can fling it around, and there's always that drive. It's just how can that not put a smile on your face? And what about the rest of the bike? Well,
Easy to get overwhelmed by the engine, but let's just have a look at stuff like the tech and all that. I've not played with the rider modes. Why would I want to try sport mode? It's not lacking in performance in any of them. But there are those rider modes if you want them. The screen here is carried over from the existing Rocket 3 that this replaces. I'll say it's a little bit small and fiddly. I quite like the kind of retro design, but the information is really, really small and quite difficult to read. And your interface with it, with these switches, is a little bit basic as well. So, you know, in an age where even Harleys have got big TFT screens, this is neither kind of basic and retro or modern and high tech. So, if the Rocket does have a weak spot, I would say that is it, and that's maybe something that the Triumph should have updated as well while they were changing all the rest of the bits on this bike. But I'm kind of clutching at straws really, because quite frankly, who gives a flying one about TFT screens when you've got an engine that does an engine that does that on demand. So I think I've been surprised at this bike. I'd be interested to ride the Ducati and see whether the Rocket could keep tabs on that on a road like this, which I suspect it probably could. I don't think a Harley or an Indian would see which way this bike went, but I think it'd be interesting trying to keep up with somebody on a Diavel on this. That'd be something I'd like to try one day. But I think when you look at the numbers, the power and the weight and all that kind of thing, you might expect it to be a bit of a one-trick pony, just a torque monster and all that, but it's much, much more than that. It's just an all-round experience, and an absolutely incredible one. I think the Triumph guys have described this bike to me as a bucket list bike, that even if it's not a bike you would necessarily want to own, it's a bike you've got to try before you hang up your riding leathers. And on that, I would absolutely agree. It's absolutely incredible.
So, the end of my day on the Triumph Rocket 3 Storm, and I'm still alive, which is good news. How did I get on? Well, on the basis that all motorbikes are kind of silly to a certain degree, this one is absolutely one of the silliest you can buy, isn't it? There's absolutely no sound reason to be putting an engine this big in a motorbike. There's no need for it, but what I rather like about it is how Triumph has just embraced the ridiculousness of it and kind of taken it seriously. It's a beautifully made bike. I think just the look of it, the design of it is, you know, it looks like something like Judge Dredd or something like that, and the finish and all the detailing, you know, you can just see how from front to back everything is just beautifully thought out and resolved. And there's the same mindset with engineering. That engine is just an absolute work of art. The way it looks, the way it sounds, the kind of the fueling, the pickup. There's a lot of thought and effort gone into making that not just a really big engine, but a really enjoyable one as well. So it's been great fun to ride. Which of the two did I prefer? Well, I think the novelty of the kind of feet forward riding position on the GT one was something a bit different for me. So that was a little bit strange, but you know, once you're seated, it's very comfortable. That would be the one you'd probably choose for racking up big distances. But I think if you're gonna have a bike like this, I think the R kind of stripped back kind of custom bike look works better with the whole Rocket concept. So I think if I was going to have one, it would be the R spec. But would I have one? I don't know. It's probably not a motorbike that I would ever seriously consider buying. Not to say it's a bad one, it's just maybe not to my tastes, I don't know. But I've had an absolute blast riding it, and as the Triumph guy said, you know, it's a bucket list bike. If you ever get the opportunity to ride one, you damn well ought to, because it's like nothing else. Unique is a much overused description, isn't it? But the Triumph Rocket 3 really is unique. There's nothing in the market like it. So let's celebrate it. The world is a better place for it existing. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit like, subscribe for more like it. Hit me up in the comments if you've got any questions or anything else you want to know about the bike. And for the meantime, I'll say thanks for watching, goodbye, and ride safe.